use this as a movement to grow globally in this moment.
When you were trying to grow 1 million activists, was it international? It wasn't just in the U.S., it was all across the country?
No, the 1 million of us, the organization I founded in 2018, was specifically in the United States. We got over 3.2 million young people to register to vote, far past our original goal of 1 million, and we continue to see that 2024 and 2028, just young people using creative campaigns to energize around the idea that voting is not just an idea that is being an active citizen, but it's a moment of moral clarity that we can move our movement forward through our ability to see voting as that sword that cuts through injustice.
Mr. Campbell, I will ask you, on the outskirts, certainly Hilton Head looks fine, but how would you describe where we are with environmental justice as you look at the environment around you?
Well, I'm on a very popular coast, the South Carolina, Georgia coast, being overrun with people. And then, some 50 years ago, when we were trying to get clean water to the area, many people didn't want the water. And one of the mayors of one of the small towns is now overflow with people. We don't want that water because if we get water, the Yankees want to come. And so we finally convinced him to get clean water from the Savannah River, got it cleaned up, and then distributed out to these various islands. Now these islands you have a population problem and a traffic problem because we had no growth control in place. And so we are in a bad fix of all the sea islands where 50 years ago we got nice clean drinking water. Water that supplied all of the resorts as well as all of the low-income people. And so our problem now is controlling that growth, unlike your problem. In Aiken, where you have no water. 50 years ago, that was our problem. So I want you to put some plan in place to preserve people who are now living in these neighborhoods on land that is not as valuable as it will be when you get water. Jim Clyburn or Councilman Clyburn and some others convinced me to stop my environmental engineering work in the Sea Islands nearly 50 years ago and go over to the Penn Center to preserve color culture. And now, Councilman Clyburn, my job is hard because we get so many people coming in endangering the Gullah culture. And so there's a two-edged sword here in terms of getting good, clean drinking water and controlling population, which is an environmental problem too.
You know, want to jump in here and give us a state of environmental justice as you see it from the CA?
Yeah, first of all, let me start out by expressing some gratitude to be upon this panel with so many esteemed experts and thank the Congressman for his leadership on this issue. And when I think about this issue, there's three things that come to mind for me. One is a wise person once said to me that budgets are moral documents. Seeing where resources are going, seeing where funding is going, is going to tell you what priorities are. And I think unfortunately now we're seeing disinvestment in this really important issue, which will lead to the second thing is that my mentor once said to me is, good intentions aren't good enough. And I think we run the risk of having a lot of great dialogue and a lot of great prose about this important issue with good intentions. But we also need to figure out how we can allocate and direct resources towards action, which is challenging given all the reasons that everyone else has shared. And then the third thing is that every single thing going to be exacerbated by climate change. We see in different regions all across the country, whether it's record wildfires and smoke that's impacting communities, whether it's record floods that impact water quality, that impact people's ability to get anywhere. I think one of the biggest challenges we're going to be facing in the future is not just those creeping impacts of climate change with sea level rise, but these catastrophic events. If you haven't had a chance to watch it, I highly recommend watching the Netflix Katrina documentary that came out recently about the 20-year anniversary, and it talks about the communities, historical communities that had to deal with a lot of these challenges, and that type of reacting to these type of climate disasters and events is environmental justice issues that we're going to need to think. How do we allocate resources to those things while also addressing historical inequities and challenges?
Mr. Evans?
So I'm going to set the stage a little where I think there are, for the first time in decades, there is massive energy growth demand in America. Whereas we, for decades, because of efficiencies and technology, we didn't need more energy. The power sector has greatly decreased their greenhouse gas emissions. And now, because of this demand growth we're seeing, it gives us an opportunity for more community engagement and a just transition and equity to have benefits. And so I want to set a little stage about that and then talk about some projects that can show that and taking advantage of this moment in time. So EEI represents all of the U.S. investor-owned electric companies in the United States, serving 250 million Americans in 50 states into the District of Columbia. Like I had said, we are facing a massive new energy demand. We are bringing manufacturing back, such as battery plants. We have obviously significant growth in AI and advanced computing technologies, data centers, and electrification. This represents a tremendous opportunity and a challenge for the power sector. To meet our nation's needs in this moment, we must use all the available tools to deploy new generation and maximize the capabilities of our transmission and distribution infrastructure. As a part of our commitment to build a resilient energy future that benefits all Americans and all communities, we are working hard to engage with community members to understand and to address environmental justice concerns and equity considerations. The landscape now, as you've heard, is difficult. Government policies are changing, and we are seeing great reductions in staff at EPA and donated in loans and projects. However, environmental justice and equity is not at the periphery for our members. It's at the core of their business planning, their governance, and customer trust. We are dedicated to providing clean, safe, reliable, and affordable energy, conducting our business in ways that protect the environment, our neighbors, and our communities. And so some projects that have just been announced recently, I'm going to highlight one in Louisiana and one in Mississippi, where in Louisiana, Meta is building their largest data center in the world, $10 billion of investment in Louisiana. And through coordination with Meta, the state, community organizations, and Entergy, they were making sure that everyone benefits. We're not just talking jobs, which we have numbers for, but making sure that Meta pays their fair share to have that power, making sure they pay to be directly connected to the grid, right? We're making sure that we're lowering the cost of the energy to customers. So they're predicting right now that at least a 10% drop in energy prices from this will go right to the pockets of customers. We know electric rates right now are high. Affordability is one of the foremost things that we're very concerned about. Another project in Mississippi is AWS is coming, and specifically AWS is providing $300 million to harden the grid. And by that means new pole technology, more tree trimming, more clearing to make sure that in weather events people do not lose power. But that's money that now is going towards $600 million. $600 million that's already going to be invested. So $1 billion in the next 5 years in Mississippi to strengthen the grid. Where, again, customer prices will go down because that direct engagement with AWS.
You've given us a nice transition because I did ask, we look at the state of where things are, but share with me any projects that you see out there that are working appreciate you starting that. Any others that you all want to highlight where you see it actually is working in terms of people engagement in environmental justice, or changes being better, or things being changed to improve conditions? I see you shaking your head, Jerome.
Yeah, I'm born and raised in Washington, D.C., and we've had incredible initiatives here to create the D.C. Resilience Hub, which will be a community coming together point in the case of emergency and extreme weather, and having a resource where people can come and charge their devices. They can come and get resources and get supplies and have access to energy grid capacity, and working with companies to do that. And I think that is one of those key points that we want to see more across the country, is more resilience hubs and communities that are at the front lines of the climate crisis. And as you talked about earlier, the need for more updates within our energy grid, because as more demand comes on with these data centers, it needs, one, not just more renewable energy coming online, but for our infrastructure itself to be modernized in a way. If we see it across the country, there is a need to double our capacity to be able to have renewable energy, more investments in geothermal, and more improvements in research and development, because there's so many kind of next frontiers that have been speaking with scientists on the geothermal front. They're saying, we have the technology to do it. It's about whether we have the moral clarity to do that on a congressional level, where we can have the budgets, more investment in that research and development that can speed up the timelines like we saw for wind and solar in the early 2000s. So I think that's one case study I've seen be successful.
Leslie, want to comment?
Well, let me just, I didn't complete my comment regarding the quick change that we've made in terms of infrastructure investment. Within 5 days, there were workers digging, improving the infrastructure where there have been many, many calls coming from. It should not take that kind of incident to cause action when you know the history of your town and the issues that they're going to eventually happen. But let me just say, with environmental justice, we have had some great trailblazers, dedicated, hardworking. The community engagement is needed so badly, I cannot even express the levels, because many of the people that we know still work just a little above minimum wage, and they cannot afford to leave their jobs during the week to attend meetings. Having said that, that engagement is needed. But you raised a very good point in terms, and I tell folks all the time, watch the budget of any municipalities, your state, and your federal, and see where the money goes. But local, let me just say, you should be looking at your area and asking your representative, how much money did you spend out of your budget in the area that I live in? What did you do? That's accountability. And if you're not asking that question, then you're not making the call for accountability to whoever represents you. But I also have neighborhood meetings. Neighborhood meetings inviting these folks that represent you and asking those questions as well. I have been in Washington since Tuesday. And Tuesday, Wednesday, and yesterday, I was in a cleanup, a national cleanup workshop. And there were a lot of experts in that room. And the conversation was about workforce ready, workforce preparedness, the different skills that are required for these jobs. And as I looked around the room, and it was a huge group of over 500 to 600 people. As I looked around the room, and the conversation was on career pathways and how they need trained workers in those roles. And I'm looking, and maybe I shouldn't do that, but I was looking at the age of the population as they talked about workers being trained as a succession plan. And I'm thinking, okay, you're talking about people of my age category and maybe a little bit lower than that, but where are the people that need to hear this conversation? They need to be in the room. And as I Now, I understand that the table has turned and many students are attending majority institutions as well. They still need to be in the room to hear the stories about what can take place and how these folks are desperate for young leaders to come into the program. But if you don't know where to go or who to contact. And I look at other individuals that are having these workshops, these forums, these seminars. They ensure that middle school, high school, and college students are somehow in the room. I can reflect on environmental justice and how with nuclear science, we talked about training and hiring individuals with experience. And again, reflecting on the congressman, under programs at nuclear site, he managed to get funds and say, I'm going to get funds available. I don't want that to be an excuse for you not hiring black and brown people. And the funding was made, they got not only exposure but experience, but they became employees. And that's the way the cycle should work.
I want to go down to Mr. Campbell, I guess I'm thinking, how do you get the community engagement and involvement in 2025 with the things that you've highlighted, everything from traffic or resources such as water and usage of water? How do you keep them engaged, or how do you get the new generation of folks engaged?
As I stated earlier, we've got too much of a good thing. We just the opposite of this price. We just turned down the development on St. Helena Island. It was going to bring in jobs. I didn't get to sleep on Monday night until 2 o'clock because we had 65 speakers at a county council meeting that did not want golf course and resort development on a little island adjacent to St. Helena. They had placards all over the county council. I mean, we had about 200 or 300 people in that meeting. And it's because they were passionate about not wanting their culture destroyed and people who are coming in to play golf and to enjoy the beach. They wouldn't have been there had not 50 years ago we brought clean water in to get cleaned up from the Savannah River and distributed to all those islands. So you got to be careful of not having too much of a good thing. You've got to have plans in place in order to bring about equity in the environment. And so there's a young man who has an island that he wants to develop. And because people think that it's going to destroy their culture, they showed up because of the issue. How it's going to affect my neighborhood, my house, and my taxes, and the traffic that's coming through my neighborhood. So if the issue touches you personally, these are organized people. It doesn't take much to organize them if they are told what's going to happen to them personally. So we've had very little problem, except at the beginning of getting clean water, because some people were saying that water is going to sterilize me. I don't want that water. I'd rather drink contaminated water because I heard that the water is going to sterilize me. So we've come from that, the people became involved in not wanting water, to now where there's water for everybody, and people are threatened by population growth.
You didn't elaborate, but I want to get you to take a second to talk a little bit about the preservation. How are you preserving that culture, given you've got the growth, you've got all the traffic, you've got attempts to have more golf courses? How do you do that? How do you preserve that important? And a lot of folks are hearing about, obviously, the Gullah culture for the first time.
Well, the Gullah culture is probably as close to West African culture as you would find in the United States. Because of the isolation of these islands before bridges and clean water, we had people who came out of slavery and remember everything about West Africa as it handed down throughout slavery. The language, the foodways, the craft, the religious belief, all that was intact as folks came out of slavery and went to these islands and were isolated for many years. And so now there is a challenge that we have on how do you preserve that culture. The development that I talked about earlier is being prevented because about 30 years ago, some folks got together and began planning for the island. And one of the things that they put in place was a cultural preservation ordinance, so as to protect the culture and preventing no golf courses, no resort development, and so that the population would not be inundated by others. So that's one tool that was used. The other tool that's being used are neighborhood protection, where you have different density requirement or different density allowed in these areas of the neighborhood. The island I live on is Hilton Head. I grew up there. And Hilton Head was bridged in 1956. The bridge connected us to the mainland. And where you had 3,000 people, we now have 30,000. It's some 20 golf courses. And we get water piped in from the Savannah River, cleaned up about 30 miles away, and piped into Hilton Head. But you have a problem with traffic control as well as growth control. Did a good job in planning earlier, but the plan was allowing too much. And so you compare that with an island like St. Helena Island, they put a plan in place that said no golf courses, no resort development. And that culture is being preserved.
And it becomes a critical piece. Cahill, I want to go to you and see if you can share with us some examples of things that you've seen that are working. People are getting engaged in environmental justice and active and making a difference.
Yeah, thank you for that. It's not all, starting out with some doom and gloom, but there are some bright spots. I want to set the context a little bit. The Nature Conservancy where I work, it's been around 75 years, and for several decades, didn't really know how to show up in the environmental justice space. A lot of our work was how do we protect the different rhino species, and how do we make sure that we have clean water in the Chesapeake Bay. But the key is evolution, and growing and learning in life. And one of the things that I think we see more and more is it's a big Venn diagram of overlapping circles when we talk about human health, we talk about justice, we talk about economics, we talk about environmental conservation. And what's really exciting now is to see those opportunities where nature and the restoration of nature where people live plays a role in people's quality of lives, plays a role in justice. When we think about justice, we should make sure we're not just thinking retroactively, but also thinking proactively into the future, because the decisions that we make now will either exacerbate or prevent environmental justice challenges in the future. I'm reminded of a story that, I'm also from Washington, D.C., And I was meeting with somebody that works in the school system here, and they were saying, it was an elementary school, and every day at recess, all the students come running out. They would all run to the same part of the playground. And I didn't understand why, and it would be a little bit of Lord of the Flies, and, who gets to be in that part of the playground and jostling each other. And then the teacher realized, that's the only tree on our whole school property, is right there. That's the only shade in the whole playground, is right there. And you can go to any city in the country, and you can look and measure temperature across different parts of the city. And you will see, here in Washington, D.C., in Northwest D.C., a wealthier part of the city, it is 20 degrees cooler in the summertime than it is in other parts of the city, where there's been decisions over decades by local governments. Where do we invest on planting trees? Where do we invest on creating green space connection opportunities for people? We're now seeing an opportunity to shift that, to direct resources, to putting trees, to putting vegetation, that not only provides shade, but also helps to filter the water and clean the water that we drink. And I'll end with this another exciting opportunity. In Louisville, Kentucky, Nature Conservancy partnered with the University of Louisville to do a program that's called Green Heart, which was a clinical study with the NIH, where we know that there's human health challenges with cardiovascular disease, and unfortunately, one of the largest at-risk demographics with cardiovascular disease in the country is Black men. And what we did was, working with the University of Louisville and NIH, create a map of where to put vegetation in communities, the type of vegetation, trees, shrubs. We planted over 9,000 trees and shrubs in a 4-mile radius, and we studied it, clinical studies. We knew the exact biomass. So it wasn't just, here's a tree, the exact thickness of the tree and the biomass and its distance from each house. And we saw real change of 15% reduction in the C protein, which is what is connected to heart disease and heart attack risk. So we're seeing opportunities where if you can align nature and human health and justice, that there's a real through line there. And that then creates an opportunity for fundraising to get people to want to help to fund that type of work, because they see multiple benefits. Somebody who's maybe interested in health sees, oh, there's nature and there's justice and there's people. I want to fund this at a scale maybe across multiple cities. So that's some exciting work that we're doing, piloting how nature is not just separate, but it's actually a key integral component to how we design our cities and how we make sure there's equity in how we design our cities.
Plan, I think, yeah. I think Carolyn was alluding to as well. I want to give you all an opportunity to ask some questions, and I'm going to see if we have people who have questions. Give you a second to come to the microphone. Great, we've got a conversation going on here. We've got a great panel. We've done some wonderful things. Oh wow, you guys can work me. This is good. This is good. That's what I'm here for. So, if you all are ready, we're going to start taking a few questions, and then I'll come back with some closing thoughts towards the end. But I definitely get our audience participation. Good afternoon.
Hello, I am Ian Alvarell from San Francisco. The question is for Ms. Price. I'm in my final year of my doctoral studies, and I'm super excited about it. I chose the subject of the intersection of redlining and aging water infrastructure and I won't say the city, it's for my own. So I wanted to know, has that conversation or intersection come up just in your conversation, in your studies with other colleagues, that intersection of redlining and aging water infrastructure in communities?
That conversation has not. What we did was brought in consultants. But interestingly enough, the people that have talked with us about the problems that we had, they brought solutions with them. And there's nothing greater than someone bringing you a problem. But these are the proposed solutions. And we followed up on those solutions. And guess what? It worked. That says that we can work together if we will communicate with each other and talk with each other. But in some of our areas, when we have an issue of that sort, those individuals may not say much at all, because oftentimes they are threatened or feel intimidated by saying what they really feel with local government, state government, federal government. But you should not hold back. You should say what you are feeling. But we have to establish greater relationships with the people that represent us, because we're taxpayers. And I found in many cases, they will reach out and help and do something. Not all of them, but many of them. And that's extremely positive, because once you see one or two starting, somehow that will expand. Thank you for the question, though, and congratulations to you.
Congratulations. Yes, ma'am.
Hi, I'm Kennedy Brooks. I'm an environmental justice fellow at a urban planning and community development organization in Prince George's County. And so one of the things that we are kind of reckoning with right now is that there is a proposed insertion of a data center in the area that we service. That's on pause right now, but it's kind of looking like it's going to happen anyway. And so my organization is sort of in these conversations about recommendations. So my question is kind of a two-parter. One, we're trying to ideate if like the data center is coming, are there different ways, like for example, harnessing the heat and putting it into like houses and things like that. So I'm curious if you guys know of any projects where environmental stimulation is kind of coexisting with this. And then also the gentleman kind of talked about this idea of like you can't really mitigate when it's too late. So anticipating that this is a low to medium income, primarily Black neighborhood with an aging population, I'm curious if you have any suggestions about how can we prepare our community for the realities of the things that are kind of going to happen once these data centers come into place, and sort of get them to a place as close to environmental resiliency as we can.
Richard, that sounds like you're in your lane.
So I am not directly connected to data centers, so I'm happy to give you my card after this, and you can shoot me an email. I can get you in touch with some folks about the first question about projects where they have integrated data centers in to then, divert heat or water usage, etc. If there's examples of that, and then happy to share that with you. From a planning standpoint of getting the community ready, my initial thought and reaction is that in the planning stages, if this does come in, having folks there at the table so that they can meaningfully participate in the build out. What does the infrastructure look at? What are the concerns, right, that you all have in taking it to that company so that they can plan ahead and try to mitigate or offset or directly address all of those. And again, I can set you up with some folks that have that direct engagement and some best practices and how that has gone. So just catch me after this. Okay?
Thank you.
Yes, absolutely.
Thank you for the question. Yes, ma'am.
Hi. So I'm Senator Dina Neal out of Nevada, and so I have a question, but then I have some background to that question. So the question, because I really was drawn to the Gullah Island perspective, just because I took on an issue of environmental justice in Nevada in 2019, and it was a sinking Black neighborhood, and literally fought and then brought in the law school and some other folks to help me move this community, right? So I was able, through God's grace, get $37 million in order to take 93 families and basically build them a new home. That's major. However, and literally, we just yesterday got the water trucks for the land that we purchased. But in the process, right, I took land from the city because it was sinking land, and I took the land so I could turn it into a park because there were 5 families that didn't want to move. But I didn't want eminent domain. I also didn't want the city to come in and basically push the 5 out. We were scared. And so I'm giving that backdrop because currently, right, people come to your aid when it's lifted up to the national space. But what I'm trying to guard against right now are the plays that are happening where they want to come back and try to take the land back. So the city has been trying to wait me out, which, trying to offer me, things, or they just politically attacked me, but I've held my ground because it was a bottom-up strategy, my neighborhoods have held me down. However, they are now sending letters because saying, oh, we're gonna take your land because the park is happening. And I'm like, trying to shut the residents, calm the residents down and say, wait, that's like a year from now. Like, we already know I'm exchanging your vacant lots, but I'm doing this park for a reason. So what would you suggest is the strategy? Because I'm trying to calm down and not be so fierce. Is how do I manage and deal with the fact that my city, which is led by a Black female mayor, who we've had battles, to try to fight around this land issue that they kind of keep speaking to the governor about, and they're kind of like secretly doing this play, and I'm like, you're never getting this land back. And so what would you suggest that I do? Because I've gotten like super fights, like real fights, like I'm just...
We don't want the super fights, we don't want the... Let's see, Joe.
You're not gonna win that one if you are involved in super fights, but it can work. It can work to a happy medium. It is important to have a support group with you, and having regular meetings, but having them as part of the discussion. But you have to form your organization first that really supports this and work on a plan. And your support group have to share their value, but the larger the group sometimes that are expressing their concerns and sharing how they value where they live can make a difference. I can talk to you more about some strategies
I have
after
a
this.
support
Yes.
group. The neighborhood is a support group. They're just as rowdy as I am.
Okay.
And we have one that's, because it's law now. It's state law. They can't take it unless they kick me out and change the legislation. But we can talk offline.
I'm gonna connect you all online. And Mr. Campbell, anything you would add to that?